So it's no surprise to anybody here, and especially people who lead organizations, and I see some of you here in the congregation, that we're in very difficult times. You're reading articles about it, there are news stories, and people are talking about how difficult it is right now. We're not post-COVID, of course. We're somewhere in the middle of this thing called COVID. Now we have monkeypox, which we should have been prepared for, and somehow here's another plague hitting the world and our community in particular, and we seem unprepared for it. We see in our organizations, in our communities, a lot of stress. People are expressing it in all different kinds of ways. I see Eric Rosenbaum here, who's our former CBST board president and is now the executive director of one of the leading organizations here in the city dealing with housing and homelessness issues. And I know, Eric, you're feeling that in your organization, both among your staff and your board and your clients. Everybody is feeling a tremendous amount of stress. It's hard to make things work. It's hard to move things forward. People are acting in all different kinds of ways that are expressing these anxieties. Anybody else experiencing this in your workplace or in your school or your families? We're all like we're in a weird zone. It's just weird. We have to surface it and discuss it, and there's no quick fix. So of course the Torah has a lot to teach us, and I'm a rabbi, so that's where I go. But it actually asks a lot of questions that I find supremely relevant and to the mark of today. And I think those of us who are in the position of trying to figure out how to lead through the wilderness we are in right now can relate to a lot of the struggles of the Israelites, of Moses and Miriam and Aaron trying to lead through the wilderness, not really knowing what lies ahead, and only knowing that behind us is a lot of disasters and feeling a lot of anxiety that there's nothing better ahead because nobody has seen that promised land that the Israelites heard tell of, but not because they know it, only because they're told to have faith that something else will exist. So another feature of our space here at CBST is this pillar, which when we built the space, originally the architects had us oriented to that wall, but we felt like it would be too long and narrow. So we asked the architects if we could organize the space this way so that it would be more intimate and nobody would be as far away. The one price we had to pay for that is that this is structural. The entire building is being held up by the various pillars, so we couldn't move it. So it turns out to be it's very important structurally. We decided to try and imbue it with spiritual power, and so you'll see we put into it the Ner Tamid, the eternal light, so it's here always to remind us of the light that is in the world, the light that we're responsible for carrying, the Ner Tamid that was with the Israelites in the wilderness and is with us now. Soon after we moved into this space, a group of about 75 rabbis came to see the new space at CBST. There hadn't been a new synagogue built in New York City in a very, very long time. So this was very big news in the New York Jewish world, just the idea of a new sanctuary, a physically new space. 75 rabbis came. They sat where all of you are here in the sanctuary. I gave a whole spiel about the building and all the different features and the meaning and purpose behind everything. And after I did it all, one of the rabbis raised his hand and he said to me that he was very moved by this because he imagined that he asked me if this was our intention. What he assumed this pillar was to represent the Amud Anan, the moving cloud that followed the Israelites through the desert and provided the direction. It helped the Israelites know which direction to go in, and it was with them throughout their time in the desert. I loved that interpretation. I told him, in fact, it was just holding up the building. However, that's the power of Midrash, right? That you imbue something with meaning, and it doesn't matter what the original purpose might have been. It takes on that meaning, and you know what? Every single time I lead services from here, I feel the Amud Anan, the cloud that led the Israelites in the wilderness. I feel it beside me. I do feel like that it serves that purpose. For me personally, as the senior rabbi here, I feel like it is reflecting this Amud Anan, the cloud that kept the Israelites moving for those 40 years of the wilderness. In this week's Parsha, the Amud Anan disappears for a while. In this week's Parsha, the two things that keep the Israelites alive and moving forward motion disappear. One is the Be'er Mayim, the well of water that we're told followed Miriam around for the 40 years in the wilderness. And guess what? If you're in the desert, a well of water that follows you around, pretty essential for survival. So in this week's Parsha, we're told the Be'er Mayim and the Amud Anan disappear. The two things that without which the Israelites are literally lost and literally dead. And they have to face the future without the things on which they so profoundly relied. But not only these things disappeared at this moment of the wilderness wanderings. This Parsha takes place in year 38, 39 or so of the 40 years. We've moved through the first 38 years, and the Israelites are now in the years 38 to 40 in this part of the telling of the story. Most of the people who left Egypt have died. The only people who are alive are another generation who didn't even know what slavery was themselves, except for a few people. In this Parsha, Miriam herself dies. And in this Parsha, Aaron, the peacemaker, dies. The only one of the three leaders who survives this Parsha is Moses. But in this week's Parsha, Moses is told he will die soon. He will not enter into the promised land. The anxiety among the people, you can imagine, was off the scale. Water, their Amud Anan, Miriam and Aaron all disappear. Aaron was the peacemaker. Moses was a kind of flawed leader in some ways, but he was the one who had the deepest connection to the Holy One. And the people now discover and learn that he himself won't continue into the promised land if they can even find it, since the Amud Anan disappeared, and if they can even survive since the water's gone. I think it's a pretty good, I don't even want to say metaphor. It's to imagine the anxiety that the Israelites were feeling so deeply resonates with how I think people are feeling today. Institutions are terrifying and feel like they're cracking. Leaders are struggling under the enormous pressure of trying to find our way without the Amud Anan, so to speak. The people keep complaining. The one feature of the Israelites throughout the time of those 40 years is complaining. They get taken out of Egypt. That's not good enough. Immediately at the base of Mount Sinai, 38 years ago, so to speak, from the moment of this Parsha, they're complaining. Moses disappears for a little bit. They need a golden calf. They want to go back to slavery almost from the moment they're out of it, because they knew what they were having for dinner there. They understood what was happening there. And in this new normal that was so scary, they just acted out over and over again. It's the story of the wilderness, complaining against the leadership for not providing exactly what they think they deserve. It's not enough that they got out of slavery, and it's not enough that they were fed and had water. They kept saying it's not enough. A very profound moment happens in this week's Parsha, different from all of the others, which is why some of our commentators say the Israelites were able to actually finally get their way into the promised land, even without the Amud Anan and without the leadership that had been with them for all of those years. For the first time, in the midst of their complaining, and they continue complaining, by the way, they don't stop. In this parsha, they complain as well. What's the difference between the complaining in this parsha and all the 38 years before? They say, Chatanu. We have sinned. It's not just you, Moses. It's not just you, Aaron. It's not just you, Miriam. And it's not just you, God. For the first time, the people, our ancestors, we are descendants of those people, were able to accept responsibility for their roles. It doesn't mean they stopped complaining, they continue, but they start to understand that it's not just about God or Moses or Miriam or Aaron being the ones who will make everything the way they want it, but it becomes a time of their taking responsibility. It's for the first time they use this word chatanu, which should sound familiar. We say that a lot during the high holidays. We sing it, we say it, we do this. That's the word that's used in this week's parsha, chatanu. We have missed the mark. We, the people, have to do better. We, the people, have to understand to create a community. We might not always have the Amud Anan. We might not always have a Be'er Mayim given to us. We might have to go out and search for it. We might not always have the perfect food. We might have to be the ones to create it. Moses is depressed in this week's parsha, and we know he loses his temper and hits the stone in order to get the water. And he knows that he's not going to get into the promised land himself. V'lo haya mayim le'edah. V'tamot sham Miriam. When Miriam dies, there was no water. It becomes the responsibility of the community to create among ourselves, to understand it's not about being given something by God. It's about creating a community in which we will be nourished, we will find our way, we will stumble through and find Haaretz, the promised land. In many ways, we're in this space in the world today, right? We don't know where we are. Nobody has the answer. And it's so easy to feel blame for somebody else is responsible somehow for the situations we're in. So we have to start, as our tradition says, by saying, okay, let us take responsibility. Exactly as Zevi said in those words from Pirkei Avot. We can't solve it all, but we can take small steps. It is not on us to do everything, but we have to take small steps. And one of the most profound steps there is to be able to be self-aware and say, Chatanu, we have also sinned. We are also not perfect. We have also not done the right thing at every moment. And let us start there as we, in this deep part of summer and the long summer days we have, and the Yamim Noraim, the days, the high holidays, the days of awe are way off in the distance. They're not that far away. But how do we start taking responsibility ourselves for creating positive, healthy relationships, positive, healthy families, positive, healthy communities, positive, healthy workplaces and congregations and communities? How do we all take this on? I believe deeply in what Abraham Joshua Heschel said, which is we start with the light within and we try to expand our light right outside of ourselves. That's our job. So I pray for each of us in these weeks and times of so much chaos in the world, that we find our own ways of saying Chatanu, that we have missed the mark, not to destroy ourselves, but to understand there's agency and power to be the source of light. And that is our charge. That is our responsibility to do as Heschel said, to take the light that you have inside you and just move it. You know, imagine just moving it just a slight distance outside of yourself to let somebody else experience it, to help somebody else let that which is inside them emerge out. Light is lit by other light. It is not lit by darkness. And as the Baal Shem Tov said, the smallest flame dispels a great darkness. Shabbat Shalom.